So I'm back at it again. I wanted to continue this series that I'm trying to do. And I'm sorry it's taken me so long to make another one of these, but I really didn't want to give up on this. My idea for this video is that I would be talking about anxiety and tips that I've gotten about anxiety. The things that my therapist has told me that resonated with me the most and I think have helped me the most with my anxiety. So as a lot of you know, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I'm not really going to get into the details of what that disorder is. You can look it up on your own time, but a lot of people love to tell me that there's no cure for it, and when I say I'm better, there's no possible way that I'm better because there's no cure. But in reality, like, yes, there's no pill that you can take that is going to make your borderline personality disorder go away, but if you go to therapy weekly like me and take medication for years and work really fucking hard on the symptoms and on the symptoms that affect your life the most, like, yeah, you can get better. Basically what I'm trying to say is that I've been doing really, really well, and I mentioned this before that my therapist just told me that if I had gone in as I am now to get diagnosed, I probably wouldn't be diagnosed with borderline because I've worked on so many of the symptoms that you have to meet a certain number, you know? Anyways, but something that I do still struggle with is kind of a generalized anxiety. And you know, like I said, while you can't take a pill for borderline personality disorder, you can take medication that helps depression and anxiety, which are things that you suffer with in different ways. In general, for me, my depression has been way better, but something that I do still struggle with is being anxious about various things. So that's stuff that I still go over pretty frequently with my therapist, so I figured that's kind of the parts that are freshest in my mind. But also anxiety is kind of just a very broad topic. I asked a couple people on Twitch actually if there was any specific anxiety advice that they'd like to hear, and so I took some notes and I figured I'd go over this based on the specific advice that they asked for. Something that I talk a lot about lately is how my life's going pretty well right now. I'm achieving a lot of things that I've been wanting to achieve for a while, and you know, all these good things are happening to me, so why am I still anxious? Why doesn't it feel good? And she told me it's a change from what I'm used to, regardless of if it's a good change or a bad change. My body is comfortable feeling the way that I did, you know, in my more depressed state where I wasn't accomplishing things. That's what I'm used to. And if I try to change that, any change is going to be uncomfortable at first. So when I start doing things that I like going out and making music and all these other things, it makes me feel anxious, and then I get hard on myself about not being able to enjoy it. But it's not that I don't enjoy it. It's because I'm used to feeling bad, and my body has to get used to how it feels to, you know, accomplish the things that I love, and realize that it's okay that I'm enjoying my life now. So I think looking back on ways that I coped with anxiety in the past, it's kind of apparent to me that I just didn't. It just didn't even cross my mind to think of ways to stop feeling how I was feeling. It was just, I've been an anxious person for so long that that's how I feel, and that was my normal. You know, if I was anxious about something that I thought was irrational, I would really be mad at myself about it. And not only would I be anxious about whatever that would be, I'd be mad at myself for having the anxiety about it, and like, which obviously just isn't helpful, like, in any aspect, and it's not gonna help me feel less anxious. It just made me more mad at myself. My example I was thinking of is music for me, and how, you know, doing music is something I really love, but I was getting a lot of anxiety surrounding, like, actually writing and, like, making it, and it would make me so mad at myself, because I'm like, you idiot, like, you love doing this, like, why is it making you feel this way? Like, why are you so anxious? Like, and I would just end up, you know, continuing to not do it, which would add to my depression. And just make me feel worse about myself. But in therapy, I learned that it's really important to find the root causes of these anxious feelings and where they're coming from, and really thinking about it. So my root cause now is really obvious to me, that I was anxious because in the past, writing music hasn't always been a healthy experience for me, and I was surrounded by people who made it really toxic and made me feel really bad at it. And for a while, it was just an extremely volatile situation whenever I was creating music. I was blocked in a way, you know, I had a mental block. And I think realizing the sources like that make it a lot easier to be kind to yourself and empathetic, and realize, like, it makes sense why I feel this way, and I'm not crazy for it. And once you know the root problem, you can start to work on those feelings. So, like, yeah, some people made me feel really bad at what I love to do. I deserve to fucking ignore that, you know, and get on with my life. And it's still something that I do struggle with. I start writing music, and the first line I write isn't amazing, and I'm like, I fucking suck, and then I'm like, okay, that's what I'm used to thinking, and I gotta push through it, even if that's how it feels sometimes. Another example that is kind of more relatable to a lot of people is social anxiety, and I still struggle with this sometimes. It is getting a lot better, though. This was one that was harder for me to figure out the root cause of, but I have a lot of anxiety, like, going out, whether it be to, like, a party or to, like, a store, and, like, shopping, and I would get really frustrated with myself, because I'm like, I want to fucking make friends, I want to do all these things, like, I don't want to stay inside. Why does it feel so terrible when I do it? And again, it's just the feeling of me being used to doing the opposite of that. And thinking back on my childhood and how experiences going out felt back then, it would usually be pretty high stress, and I had a really anxious childhood, and going out wasn't always fun for me. So it's just where my brain goes. Even when my intention is to have fun, my body, like, is learning how to change the feeling into it being an enjoyable experience. So there was actually 2 parties this weekend that I was really nervous about going to, and I was talking about this to a gal on Twitch, about how she actually was like, okay, I have a party that I got invited to next week, and I'm already so anxious about it. And I'm like, yeah, I understand that feeling a lot. But something that I learned in therapy is just to remember how not self-serving that thought is. That the thought of like, I already don't want to go, and like playing every single situation in your head that could possibly go wrong at the party, because none of that has happened yet, and there is zero reason that any of that is going to happen. And in reality, you have no idea what will happen. And just be gentle to yourself about that, and just remember that your mind's convincing you of these things like it's a fact, and like these things will happen, so you should not go. But when you break it down to that, it's really silly, you know? So in my life, I ended up going to 2 parties, and I was anxious at a couple points, but I knew that I was pushing through it, and that I was exercising my muscle of going out. I repeat that line a lot, and I think it's really effective for me. But if you think about it as like a muscle, it's so accurate in a way. Like, if I stayed home and I didn't go to these things, I wouldn't start getting better, and I wouldn't start being able to not have any social anxiety, you know? So you have to give yourself a chance. You have to take it on kind of as a challenge, and, you know, kind of make it like a homework assignment in a way. So another thing that someone brought up to me that I've actually been talking about recently in therapy is that the person who asked me this advice was talking about how they feel like no one likes them, and they feel like they're intimidating to people. And I actually have been talking about the whole intimidation thing to my therapist recently, because I feel like sometimes if you're anxious, it can come off as being intimidating. I think something to remember also is that you're your own worst critic, and that although you might think that all of these people that you're around and meeting are thinking like, oh, this guy's weird, this guy's mean, they probably aren't thinking anything. I've been thinking a lot about how, like, in order to manifest good things happening in my life, I need to be open to good things happening to me, and put myself in places where my goals can, you know, be manifested to actually happen. So in doing that, I'm gonna meet people, which does give me anxiety, but I have to remember that it doesn't do me any good to think about what could happen and playing all of these hypothetical possibilities in my head. And in reality, unless there's like some sort of schedule thing or small details you need to plan, you don't really need to prepare yourself as much as people tend to mentally prepare themselves. I was reading this thing, and I talked to my therapist about it too. This is going to be kind of vague because I do not know the scientific words, but it was about how the stress hormone in our brain is used so frequently nowadays by majority of people, and like there's no need for it to be producing that much that often, and it's just become the norm of people, and it almost feels like irresponsible for me at times to not be anxious, because I feel like I'm like letting my guard down, or like I'm not figuring things out correctly. And the majority of the time, like when you're anxiously thinking things, like you're not actually solving anything, you're doing yourself harm and very rarely doing yourself any good. But like I was learning that like that hormone, you know, its purpose is to like tell us when something's going wrong or like get us out of a bad situation. So like it has its purposes. Basically what I'm trying to say is that we don't need to feel this terrible and stressed all the time, and that being relaxed and not worrying about things is actually okay. And it seems so simple, but I really need to remind myself that frequently. There's something about me where I feel like if I relax and if I'm not worrying about anything, then that means something bad will happen. And it's just silly to say it out loud, but that's how it feels to me. I think it roots from just having an anxious childhood and thinking that if I wasn't on top of everything, something would go wrong, and trying to have the control and keep everything together. But in reality, I didn't need that stress as a child, and I should have just been able to live and have a relaxing, nice time. But that's what made the constant anxiety feel normal to me now. So it's really just a literal rewiring of what I've learned, but it does take a while, and that's why I have to constantly remind myself that I don't have to feel like that, and put myself through these little exercises and tests that will end up strengthening me and making my life a lot more enjoyable. Another thing that someone asked me about was anxiety attacks and how to deal with those. I think that there is a distinction between a panic attack and an anxiety attack. I think that I would have anxiety attacks a lot more frequently, but I have had a handful of panic attacks in my life. I'm sorry, it is so fucking sweaty, I'm dying. Panic attacks are a little different, and at least for me personally, during those moments, I've literally thought I was gonna die. Anxiety attacks feel, at least for me, extremely terrible, like I want to die, but, you know, it's different. It's hard to explain. Thinking back on when I would have a lot of anxiety attacks and I would allow my anxious, terrible, negative feelings to consume me, in those moments, it's so uncomfortable and overwhelming that you just don't even know what to do. But at the same time, I can admit now that there's part of you that doesn't want to stop it in those moments. It's like, it seems crazy to hear that, but like, in those moments it feels like I have no way to possibly ever release this. And that's like one of the scariest parts, you know? But it's hard for me to want to let go in those moments. I think it's important to remind yourself that you have total control and that nothing terrible is going to happen to you. I think it's important that if an anxiety attack is happening around another person, or if it's during an argument, it's important for me to completely remove myself, because a lot of the time someone who doesn't go through anxiety attacks won't handle it the right way, and that's not their fault. That's another factor that can end up making things worse. What I try to ideally do myself is to remove myself, lay down, and I put on a guided meditation. I use the app Stop, Breathe, Think, which I'll link here, but it has the options to like pick how you're feeling, and I pick up like fucking terrible 5 times, you know? And a lot of the time, the ones that it recommends you are like mindfulness, which I think, and body scan. Both of those are really helpful during moments like this. I prefer body scan just because it's helpful to remember your physical form and that you're physically all right. And it's also really helpful, I think, to feel where the anxiety is affecting you, like pinpoint it as if it's a cloud or a certain color, and just notice how it physically feels. It makes it feel a lot more tangible and a lot less overwhelming. So a body scan meditation will usually like guide you through feeling how your head feels, your neck, your arms, relax the muscles in your body, just notice how parts of you feel. And I think that that's really, really helpful in moments like that. I also personally have anti-anxiety medication that I take solely during the moments that I have an anxiety attack or a panic attack, and a lot of the time those are just medications that make me sleepy, but that's fine, because a lot of the time the most helpful thing for me in a moment like that is to just sleep it off. Anyway, I hope I can edit this in some way that makes it make any sense. I feel like I was really rambly, but hopefully someone with anxiety gets something from this. Also, please let me know if there's anything more specific you'd like me to talk about, or anything else that you would like a therapist's or my advice about. So, thank you so much, everyone, and bye.